There are families that break loudly. Arguments that shake walls. Doors that come off hinges. Words thrown like objects across rooms that have held too many years of the wrong kind of silence. And then there are families like the Ashfords. Families that break quietly. With the correct cutlery on the correct side of the plate, and 17 guests watching and nobody raising their voice because raising your voice is something other people do. This is the story of Cecily Ashford. The wrong daughter. The one who was going to amount to nothing. And what happened the morning after her father told her so. To understand what happened at Ashford Park on the evening of the 14th of September, you need to understand what the Ashfords are. Or rather, what they believe themselves to be. The Ashford family has held land in the Cotswolds for 230 years. The estate sits on 400 acres of the kind of English countryside that makes people who have never been to England think they understand it. Rolling hills. Stone walls. Sheep on distant slopes. A village at the edge of the property with a pub and a post office and a church where 6 generations of Ashfords have been baptized and married and buried in that order. The house itself is the kind of house that has a name, and a history and a restoration project that has been ongoing in one wing or another for as long as anyone can remember. Ashford Park. 14 bedrooms. 3 reception rooms. A library that smells of leather and old paper and ambition. A dining room with a table that seats 24 and portraits on the walls of ancestors who look as though they were born already disapproving of whatever you are about to do. Lord Edmund Ashford is 62 years old. He inherited the title from his father, and the estate from his father, and the particular set of beliefs that accompany both. He is a tall man. Slim. Silver at the temples. He wears his suits the way men of his background wear suits, as though they grew there, as though being impeccably dressed is not something he thinks about but simply something he is. He has 3 children. Alexander, the eldest, 34. He works in finance in London and visits the estate on Christmas, and sometimes Easter, and calls his father every Sunday, which is the correct frequency. Diana, the middle, 31. She married well, in her father's estimation, which means she married someone whose family is in the same section of the same directories as the Ashfords, and she lives 40 minutes away and comes for dinners and takes her father's side in most things because taking her father's side is simply easier. And Cecily, the youngest, 28. The wrong daughter. This is not something Edmund Ashford has always said aloud, but it is something that has been felt in the atmosphere of the house for as long as Cecily can remember. From the time she was small, there was a sense that she had arrived in the wrong family, or possibly the family had arrived at the wrong version of her, and neither party could quite work out how to resolve the discrepancy. She was not obedient in the particular way the family required obedience. She was not interested in the things the family required interest in. She asked questions that didn't have comfortable answers and formed opinions that didn't defer to the right people and spent too much time drawing in margins of textbooks and too little time on the things that were supposed to matter. She went to the right schools because Edmund Ashford's children go to the right schools. She studied the wrong things. Art history at a university her father found acceptable, and then a postgraduate year in Florence that he found less acceptable, and then 2 years in London doing things he found completely unacceptable, which were sharing a flat in Hackney with people he had never heard of, working for a design agency he had never heard of, and beginning, very quietly, in the evenings and on weekends, to build something he didn't know about at all. The relationship between Cecily and her father had been cooling for years. Not a dramatic cooling. A slow one. The kind that happens when 2 people occupy the same family, and cannot find a single piece of common ground to stand on. He found her choices baffling. She found his values suffocating. They were both too controlled to fight about it openly, which meant the distance between them simply grew, inch by inch, until by the time she was 25 there were entire rooms of unsaid things, and she had learned to navigate Sunday dinners like a person navigating a minefield with very good posture. She came to Ashford Park for important occasions. Christmas. The summer garden party he has hosted annually for 30 years. Family events of the kind that require the complete set. And the gathering on the 14th of September, which was billed, in the letter Edmund sent to his children in August, as a family occasion to mark a significant anniversary of the estate, with several close friends and associates in attendance. 17 guests. The right food. The right wine. The portraits looking down from the dining room walls. And Edmund Ashford standing at the head of the table at 8:43 in the evening, with his second glass of claret in front of him, making an announcement. She did not see it coming. This is important. She was not prepared. She had felt the tension at dinner, the particular quality of silence that settles over the Ashford table when something is wrong and no one has addressed it yet. But she had attributed it to the argument she and her father had before dinner about her work, a brief and carefully worded exchange in which he had said, as he had said variations of before, that he didn't understand what she was doing with her life and that at 28 he would have expected more clarity from a person of her background, and she had said, as she had said variations of before, that she had plenty of clarity, just not the kind that matched his specific requirements. The usual tension. She had not expected what came next. Edmund stood. He tapped the side of his glass once, the way a man does when he has something prepared. "I want to say something," he said, "and I want to say it in front of the people in this room because they are the people whose opinion of this family I value." Cecily looked at her brother across the table. Alexander looked at his plate. He knew. She understood immediately that he had known. Her father spoke for 4 minutes. She counted them afterward, in retrospect, because she needed something to do with her mind during those 4 minutes other than feel them. He spoke about the Ashford name, and what it had always meant. He spoke about responsibility and legacy and the kind of character a family of their standing is required to produce. He spoke about disappointment. He spoke, specifically, about a youngest daughter who had been given every advantage and every opportunity that the family could provide and who had, in his considered and final opinion, squandered them in favor of a lifestyle and a set of choices that he could no longer in good conscience associate with the name she carried. He did not shout. He did not use cruel language. He spoke in the measured, reasonable, perfectly modulated tone of a man who has decided that what he is saying is not only correct but necessary, and who has therefore given himself permission to say it with complete composure. He said that he was removing Cecily from his will. He said that she would receive no further financial support from the estate or from him personally. He said that he hoped, in time, she would come to understand that he had done this not with any malice but with the regret of a father who had simply run out of patience. He sat down. He picked up his glass. He took a sip of claret. 17 people in the room and not one of them made a sound. Diana was looking at the table. Alexander was still looking at the plate. The guests were doing the thing that people do when they have witnessed something they didn't expect and don't know what to do with, which is to look anywhere except at the person it has been done to. Cecily sat very still. She thought about a number of things in the next 30 seconds. She thought about being 7 years old and showing her father a drawing she had made of the horses in the paddock, which she had worked on for most of a Saturday afternoon, and him glancing at it, and saying that was nice and going back to his newspaper. She thought about the school play at 13 when she had the lead and he sent his apologies and Diana came instead. She thought about Florence, and the years she spent there, and how alive she had felt in a way she had not felt at Ashford Park, not once, not in her entire childhood. She thought about what she had been building for the past 3 years. She thought about a phone call she had received that morning. Then she folded her napkin. She placed it on the table. She stood up. She did not say anything. Not one word. She picked up her bag from the back of her chair. She walked the length of the dining room, past the portraits, past the sideboard with the silver that had been in the family since the 1840s, past the fireplace and the high windows that look out over the dark grounds. She opened the dining room door. She walked through it. She closed it behind her. Quietly. The way her father would have wanted. She drove herself to the village pub. She sat at the bar and ordered a glass of wine and drank it slowly and did not cry, not because she wasn't feeling anything but because she had learned a very long time ago that certain feelings need to be felt somewhere private or not at all, and a pub in a Cotswolds village was neither. She called one person. Her friend Rose, who had been her flatmate in Hackney and who was now living in Bristol and who answered on the second ring the way she always did. Cecily told her what had happened. There was a silence on the line. Then Rose said fairly quietly, "Well, I suppose the timing couldn't be more interesting." "No," Cecily agreed. "I suppose it couldn't." They talked for an hour. About nothing important. About a series they were both watching and a restaurant Rose had been to in Bristol and a book Cecily had been meaning to read. Ordinary things. Then Cecily finished her wine and drove to the small hotel in the next village where she had booked a room when she came down for the weekend, because she had stopped staying at Ashford Park 2 years ago. She brushed her teeth. She got into bed. She looked at the ceiling for a while. She picked up her phone. She looked at the email she had received that morning, which she had read 3 times before driving to Ashford Park and which she had not told anyone about because she had not quite decided yet what to do with it. Then she read it a 4th time. Then she called the number at the bottom. It rang twice. A man answered. Clipped, professional. The voice of someone who is accustomed to receiving important calls at all hours. "Mr. Hargrove," she said. "It's Cecily Ashford." "Miss Ashford. I expected to hear from you earlier. I was at a family dinner." A brief pause in which she suspected he was exercising considerable professional restraint. "Of course. Have you made a decision?" "Yes," she said. She looked at the ceiling. "I have. To understand the email, you need to understand Lady Margaret Ashford. Edmund's mother. Cecily's grandmother. A woman who has been, in the years Cecily has been alive, the most complicated presence in her life. Lady Margaret was 81 years old. She had been born into a family of considerable means, married into the Ashford estate at 22, produced 2 children, and then spent the next 50 years watching everything around her with the particular attention of someone who does not miss much and does not forget anything. She and Edmund had a relationship that Cecily, as a child, had not understood and as an adult understood too well. He was her son, and she loved him in the way parents love children who have become people they would not have chosen. With a complicated loyalty that is half pride and half grief. She had watched Edmund for decades. Watched him inherit the estate and the title and the beliefs that came with them. Watched him shape his children in his own image and succeed with 2 of them. Watched what happened with the 3rd. Lady Margaret had a separate house on the estate. A smaller house, a stone cottage really, at the far edge of the grounds, that had been her domain since Edmund's father died 12 years ago, and she had, with great grace and zero sentimentality, handed the main house to the next generation. She was not a warm woman in the conventional sense. She did not bake things or dispense hugs or ask about feelings in the way that grandmothers in certain kinds of stories do. But she was present. When Cecily was small and at Ashford Park during school holidays, Lady Margaret was the one who noticed things. Who noticed that Cecily had finished every book in the small sitting room and needed new ones. Who noticed that the drawing in the margin was actually rather good and said so, directly, without qualifications. Who asked, on a walk across the grounds when Cecily was 14, what she wanted to do with her life, and then actually listened to the answer without redirecting it towards something more appropriate. She was not effusive. She did not fill rooms with warmth. But she saw Cecily in a way that no one else in the family did, and Cecily understood this without it ever being said. They had lunch together, the 2 of them, every time Cecily came to the estate. Even in the years when visits became less frequent, and the relationship with her father more difficult, she came for those lunches. Lady Margaret served good wine even at lunch. She asked specific questions. She expected specific answers. And in the last 2 years, something had shifted in those lunches. Lady Margaret had begun to ask, with increasing precision, about what Cecily was building. Not in a general way. In detail. She wanted to know how the business model worked. She wanted to know who the clients were. She wanted to know what the growth trajectory looked like and what the realistic valuation ceiling was and what Cecily's exit strategy was if she chose to have one. These were not questions Cecily had expected from an 81-year-old woman in a Cotswolds cottage. But Lady Margaret Ashford had not spent 60 years watching everything around her without understanding how things worked. She had her own money, entirely separate from the estate. Money from her family, managed quietly and well for decades. She had also, it turned out, purchased a property. 30 years ago. A manor house in the Cotswolds. Thornfield House. 2 miles from the estate. 14 acres of grounds. A house with a history going back to the early 18th century, with gardens that had been lovingly restored in the 90s and a stone facade that had been photographed for every significant architectural publication that covered the English countryside. She had bought it as an investment, she told Cecily at one of those lunches, about a year before she died. Or rather as an instrument. Cecily had asked what she meant. Lady Margaret had refilled their wine glasses. Instruments, she said, are things you acquire when you have a particular piece of music in mind, and you want to make sure you have the right means to play it. She did not elaborate. Cecily did not push. But she had thought about that conversation often in the months that followed. Lady Margaret died in June. Quietly at home, in the stone cottage, early on a Tuesday morning. The estate passed to Edmund, as expected. Her personal estate went to her solicitors to administer. And in July, Mr. Hargrove of Hargrove and Associates sent Cecily a letter. Then, when the letter went unanswered because she was traveling for work, an email. The email she received on the morning of the 14th of September. The morning of the dinner. The morning of the dining room and the 4 minutes and the folded napkin. The email informed her that under the terms of Lady Margaret Ashford's will, Thornfield House and all contents thereof, along with a separate endowment of £800,000 for the maintenance and staffing of the property for a minimum of 5 years, had been left in its entirety to her granddaughter Cecily Ann Ashford. With no conditions. And no reversals. Effective immediately upon the completion of the legal process, which Mr. Hargrove was pleased to inform her was now complete. The estimated value of the property, Mr. Hargrove noted in a final paragraph that was as close to delicate as legal correspondence gets, is in the region of £28 million. On the morning of the 15th of September, a Saturday, a car arrives at the hotel at 9 o'clock. It is not a showy car. Cecily is not interested in shows. It is a clean dark car driven by a man Mr. Hargrove has arranged, and it takes her through the Cotswolds lanes to Thornfield House. Mr. Hargrove meets her at the gate. He is a compact, precise man of about 60 who has been managing Lady Margaret's affairs for 15 years and who clearly feels, in the set of his shoulders and the professional warmth of his greeting, that he is completing something that has been a long time in its completion. He hands her a set of keys on a plain ring. She looks at them for a moment. Then she looks at the house. Thornfield House from the gate is something that requires a moment. Even if you have been here before, which Cecily has, once, as a child, accompanying Lady Margaret on some errand she was too young to understand. Even if you know what it looks like, from photographs and memory and description. It requires a moment. The approach is a lane of old chestnut trees, their canopies meeting overhead, the light coming through in the particular way autumn light comes through deciduous trees, golden and specific and already preparing to leave. The house at the end of it is pale Cotswold stone, the color that is somewhere between honey and cream, 2 stories with a third in the dormers, the kind of proportions that were worked out by people who understood that a building and its landscape should be in conversation and not competition. The gardens are everything the photographs suggested. Walled kitchen garden to the east. Herbaceous borders that are at the end of their summer abundance, still beautiful but beginning to draw inward. A lawn that runs down to a ha-ha and beyond that to open countryside that reaches the horizon without interruption. She stands at the gate for a full minute. Mr. Hargrove does not rush her. He is too good at his job to rush her. Then she walks up the lane. She puts the key in the lock. She opens the door. She does not call anyone that morning. She walks through the house alone. Through the entrance hall with its flagstone floor and the oak staircase that rises from it. Through the drawing room with the fireplace large enough to stand in. Through the library, which is smaller than Ashford Park's library but better organized, with a section that she recognizes immediately as Lady Margaret's personal collection, the books she actually read rather than the ones that were supposed to be read. Through the dining room and the morning room and the kitchen, which has been recently modernized without any loss of character, the kind of renovation done by someone who understood what they had and didn't want to lose it. She goes upstairs. She goes into every room. She opens every window. She stands in what will be her bedroom, at the window that faces west over the garden and the fields beyond, and she stays there for a long time. There is a letter on the bedside table. Her name on the envelope, in Lady Margaret's handwriting. She sits on the edge of the bed. She opens it. The letter is 3 pages, handwritten on Lady Margaret's personal stationery in the careful, slightly compressed script she used for things that mattered. She begins by noting that she is aware Cecily will have questions and that she will attempt to answer the ones she has anticipated, which will be most of them. She writes that she has been watching the Ashford family for 60 years and that this has given her a particular kind of knowledge that is not always comfortable to possess. She writes about Edmund. She does not write about him with cruelty. She writes about him honestly, which is sometimes the same thing and sometimes harder. He became, she writes, a man who confused the appearance of value with value itself, who mistook the performance of a certain kind of life for the substance of one. I watched this happen and I could not prevent it, and I am not certain I tried as hard as I might have. She writes about Cecily. She writes, I have watched you since you were small. I have watched you be misread and underestimated by people who should have known better, and I include myself in the years when I was not yet paying the right kind of attention. You have your grandfather's mind and something else that is entirely your own, which is a quality I am not sure I can name except to say that it is the quality of someone who will not be diminished. Not by circumstance. Not by opinion. Not by the people who are supposed to see you most clearly and see you least. She writes about Thornfield House. She writes that she bought it 30 years ago because she understood, even then, that the time would come when it would be needed. Not as a gift, she writes. I want you to understand that. I am not giving you this because I feel sorry for you. I have never felt sorry for you. I am giving it to you because it is yours. Because I looked at everything I had and I looked at the people around me and I asked myself who would know what to do with it, and the answer was not a question. Then she writes something that Cecily reads twice. She writes, Your father will have done, by now, whatever he was going to do. I don't know the specifics. I know Edmund. I know the occasion he has planned, because I know how he thinks, and I know he has been preparing something for some time. I want you to know that whatever was said in that room was said by a man who has spent 60 years confusing his own limitations with other people's failures. You are not his failure. You are the thing he could not see. There is a difference. The letter ends simply. She writes, I am sorry I ran out of time before I could say more of this to your face. Drink the wine in the cellar. It is better than you expect. I have been saving the good ones for someone who would appreciate them, and there was never quite the right moment, and now here we are. She signs it, with love and considerable satisfaction, Grandmother. Cecily folds the letter. She holds it for a moment. Then she puts it back in the envelope. She sets it carefully on the bedside table. She sits on the edge of the bed in the house that is hers, in the room that is hers, looking out at the garden in the September morning light. And then, quietly, in a room where no one can hear her, she lets herself feel all of it. Every year of it. Every dinner. Every unread drawing and misplay and carefully worded disappointment. Every Sunday she drove to an estate where she was tolerated rather than known. She lets herself feel it completely, which is the only honest way to feel anything. And then she gets up. She goes downstairs. She finds the kitchen. She makes herself a cup of tea. She sits at the kitchen table in her grandmother's house, and she looks out at the garden, and she drinks it. By Monday morning, it is in the papers. She did not put it there. She made 2 calls on Saturday afternoon, both to people she trusted, and one of those people has a contact at a property column who heard something interesting and made a few calls of their own. The Cotswolds property correspondent of a national newspaper runs a piece online on Sunday evening. By Monday it has been picked up. Ashford granddaughter inherits £28 million manor. The details come out quickly, the way details do when they have a story worth telling. Lord Ashford's youngest daughter, publicly removed from the family, will on Friday evening in front of guests, wakes up the following morning as the owner of one of the most photographed manor houses in the Cotswolds, left to her outright by the family matriarch. The timing, one headline notes, is remarkable. Remarkable is one word for it. She does not read most of the coverage. She is busy. She has a business to run. That is the other thing, the thing that has been sitting quietly alongside everything else, that comes out over the following days. The design and technology consultancy she has been building for 3 years from the Hackney flat and then from a small office in East London has, in the 2 weeks prior to the dinner, closed a contract with a major European creative conglomerate that is the largest contract the company has signed and that will require, among other things, that she expand her team significantly and establish a proper base of operations. A base she now has. She moves her company's registered address to Thornfield House the following week. She converts the East Wing, which has a series of interconnected rooms that Lady Margaret used as a studio, into a working office. She hires 2 new staff members. She takes the first meeting with the new European clients from the drawing room at Thornfield House, a meeting conducted over video with the walled garden visible through the window behind her, and she is told afterward by her business partner that the clients were visibly impressed. She is not doing this for the impression. She is doing it because this is where she works now. But she is also not sorry about the impression. Edmund Ashford calls on Wednesday. She knows his name on the screen, and she looks at it for a moment. She does not answer. He calls again on Thursday. She does not answer that either. On Friday, a letter arrives. She can tell from the envelope, from the handwriting that is somehow formal even in the act of addressing an envelope, that he wrote it himself. She sets it on the kitchen table. She makes a cup of tea. She looks at the letter for a while. Then she opens it. He writes that he was not aware of his mother's arrangements. He writes that he understands the situation may appear, from the outside, to have a particular character that he finds uncomfortable. He writes that he would like to speak with her. He does not apologize. She notices this. Not with bitterness, particularly. With clarity. This is who he is. This is who he has always been. A man who can write a letter in which he clearly wants something and use 90 words to say it while never finding the 30 that would require him to say sorry. She reads the letter twice. Then she puts it back in the envelope. She takes out a sheet of paper. She writes back. She writes, Edmund, I received your letter. I understand you didn't know about grandmother's arrangements. Neither did I, not fully, until Friday night. I've been thinking about what you said at dinner. I've been thinking about it for a few days now. I think what I want to say is this. I'm not angry. I'm not interested in a war. I am going to build something here, at this house, and it is going to be good, and I don't need your approval for it, and I no longer need your good opinion. What I needed, when I was small, was for you to see me. Not the idea of me that fit into the right frame, but me. You weren't able to do that. I have spent a long time being sad about that, and I am not going to spend more time on it. I wish you well. The door here is not closed. But I won't be waiting by it. Cecily. She reads it back. She seals it. She posts it. She goes back to work. Alexander comes to see her the following week. He calls ahead, which she appreciates. He arrives on a Tuesday morning and she makes coffee and they sit in the kitchen, and for a while they don't say the obvious things. He looks around the house with the expression of someone taking something in slowly. Then he says, I knew about the dinner. I want you to know I'm not proud of that. She nods. Why didn't you say something, she asks. He wraps both hands around his coffee cup. Because, he says, and then he stops. Because I've been doing the thing I've always done, which is to calculate the cost of speaking and find it too high. She looks at him. He is 34 years old and he looks, in this kitchen, in the morning light, like someone who has been carrying something for a long time and is only now deciding whether to put it down. You should work on that, she says. I know. She refills his coffee. They talk for a long time after that. Not about their father, specifically. About other things. About what he actually wants, which he is only beginning to work out at 34, which is late but not too late. About what she is building here. About Lady Margaret, who they discover, in comparing notes, saw each of them more clearly than they had perhaps understood and left each of them exactly what they needed, even if what she left Alexander was less tangible than a manor house. What did she leave you? Cecily asks. He is quiet for a moment. A letter, he says. 4 pages. I've read it every day for 2 months and I'm still finding things in it. She nods. She thinks of her own 3 pages on the bedside table. She thinks of the line about being the thing her father could not see. She thinks about the difference between that and being invisible. One means the limitation is yours. The other means the limitation is theirs. It has taken her 28 years and a letter on a bedside table in a house she didn't know she was going to own to properly understand which one it was. Diana comes later. Not to apologize, exactly. Diana is too much her father's daughter for exactly. She comes because she is curious, Cecily suspects, and because she has heard about the house and the business and the coverage, and she wants to see it with her own eyes. They have tea in the garden. Diana is well dressed and well composed and looks around the grounds with an expression that is a very English mixture of admiration and discomfort. It's beautiful, she says. Yes, Cecily says. Grandmother always did have extraordinary taste. She did. A silence. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Diana says. Easy how? Make me feel better about it. The dinner. I didn't stop him. No, you didn't. Diana looks at her hands. I didn't know it was going to be like that. What did you think it was going to be like? I thought it was going to be a conversation. I thought he was going to talk to you privately. Cecily looks at the garden. But you knew something was coming. Yes. And you didn't warn me. No. She says it cleanly, without defense. Cecily is quiet for a moment. This is the thing about Diana that she has always found both maddening and, in its way, honest. She does not pretend. She made the calculation she made, and she is not going to dress it up as anything other than that. I'm not going to pretend I'm fine with that, Cecily says. But I also know that you've been making that calculation your whole life and that it's not simple and that I'm not going to resolve it for you. Diana nods. They drink their tea. The garden is very quiet in the autumn afternoon. Eventually Diana says, what you said to him. In the dining room. Nothing. Cecily waits. I've been thinking about it all week. How you just folded your napkin and walked out. Not one word. There wasn't anything to say, Cecily tells her. Not right then. Not in that room. But it was the right thing. I don't know if it was the right thing, Cecily says. It was just the true thing. The true thing at that moment was that there was nothing more to be said in that room, and so I left the room. Diana is quiet. I think I've never done that, she says. The true thing. I've always done the calculated thing. Yes. Do you think that can change? Cecily looks at her sister. 28 years old, and she has not had an uncomplicated relationship with this woman who has been on the other side of every family equation. But she looks at her now, in the garden in the autumn light, and she sees someone who is also, in her way, asking questions that are long overdue. I think, Cecily says carefully, that it can start to change whenever you decide you want it to. Diana nods. They stay in the garden until the light changes. It is not a resolution. It is the beginning of something that might, given time and patience and the particular willingness to have uncomfortable conversations in beautiful gardens, eventually become one. Edmund Ashford does not come. She does not expect him to. He is 62 years old, and he has spent 62 years being exactly who he is, and a letter from his youngest daughter, however well worded, is not going to alter that in any fundamental way. She knows this. She is at peace with it. Not the peace of having settled something. The peace of having understood something, clearly and fully, and decided not to fight it anymore. He is who he is. She is who she is. These two facts coexist. What she builds at Thornfield House in the year that follows is considerable. The consultancy grows. She takes on 6 new people. She takes on clients from 3 new countries. She converts the old coach house into a dedicated studio space, and it becomes, among people in her industry, one of the most talked about working environments in England. She hosts things at the house. Not the kind of things her father hosts. Not the formal dinners with the correct cutlery and the portraits looking down. She hosts working weekends for young designers who cannot afford studio space. She opens the garden on 2 weekends in summer and invites people from the village and charges a small entrance fee that goes to a local charity Lady Margaret had supported. She drinks the wine from the cellar. It is, as advertised, better than she expected. She reads all the books in the library, eventually. She takes her lunches sometimes in the walled kitchen garden, at a small iron table that was there when she arrived, with a view of the espaliered pears against the south wall. She calls Alexander every week. She has dinner with Diana occasionally. She does not call her father. She does not wait to hear from him. She is not performing the not waiting. She is genuinely, straightforwardly, not waiting. Because Lady Margaret was right about one thing above all others. She wrote it in the letter, in that careful compressed script, on the 2nd page. She wrote, "The mistake the unseen person makes is to keep going back to the person who cannot see them and asking to be seen. This is the mistake. It is understandable. It is human. But it is also the thing that keeps you small. The day you stop asking that person to see you is the day you begin to be visible to everyone else." She stops asking. And the visibility that follows is nothing like what she expected. Not fame, exactly. Not the kind of recognition that comes from being in the papers. Something quieter and more durable than that. She becomes known, slowly, in the circles that matter to her, as someone who does things well and does not perform doing them well. As someone who built something real in a house she didn't know she was going to have, because the house was never the point. She was building before the house. The house is simply where the building happens now. She walks the grounds in the evenings when the work is done. The 400 acres of Ashford Park are visible from the east side of the Thornfield property, if you stand at the right angle on the right rise. She goes there sometimes. She looks across at it. The old stone house in the distance. The lights in the windows. She does not feel what she expected to feel when she looks at it. She expected anger or grief, or the particular longing of someone who wanted to belong somewhere and was told they didn't. What she feels is simpler. She feels like someone standing on their own land, looking at the land next to it. Adjacent. Neighboring. No longer inside. The wrong daughter. That is what he called her, in effect, in the dining room on the 14th of September, in front of 17 people and 20-something years of portraits. She thinks about that phrase sometimes. Wrong. Wrong for what, exactly? Wrong for Ashford Park, maybe. Wrong for the vision of what a person with her name and her background was supposed to be. Wrong for the frame he had built for her before she was old enough to have any say in whether she fit it. But Lady Margaret did not leave Thornfield House to the right daughter. She left it to the true one. The one who asked questions. The one who drew in the margins. The one who went to Florence and felt alive and came back changed and refused to pretend otherwise. The one who sat in a dining room while her father spoke for 4 minutes and then folded her napkin and stood up and walked out without a word. Because the truest thing she could do in that moment was to leave. And the truest thing she has done since is to stay. Here. In this house. At this table. In this garden. Building the things she was always going to build. Finally, at last, somewhere she belongs. And that is the story of the wrong daughter. Except she was never wrong. She was simply too large for the frame they had built for her, and when the frame finally broke, it broke on a Friday evening in a dining room in the Cotswolds, in front of 17 people, and she walked out of it without a word. Because some things do not require a response. Some things require only a napkin, folded, placed on the table. A bag picked up from the back of a chair. A door closed quietly behind you. And a phone call, made at midnight in a small hotel room, to a solicitor who has been waiting for you to be ready. There are people in this world who will look at you and see only what you are not. What you are not matching. What you are not becoming. What you are not doing correctly. And there are people who will look at you and see exactly what you are, and understand it, and wait quietly for the moment when the rest of the world catches up. Lady Margaret Ashford waited 81 years to play the piece she had in mind. And she played it perfectly. The house in the end was never really about the house. It was about a woman who had watched her family for 60 years and understood that the thing you leave behind is not the property. It is the permission. Permission to be seen. Permission to stop asking to be seen by people who cannot see you. Permission to stand on your own land and look at the land next to it and feel, for the first time, that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. That is what Lady Margaret left her. The house was just where she put it.